Hi, I'm Chef Nicholas Lodge and welcome to this Flour Pro video where I'm going to show you how to use my small log slice actually to mold cookie dough in and then bake the log slices. So let's get started. In my Flour Pro log slices there are three sizes. Here you can see this is actually in book number 4, and in book 4 I show this is the Flour Pro Seasonal Designs book number 4. In this book, obviously, this shows and features the obviously 3 sizes of the log slice. Now, there are videos for how to use the large log slice, how to use a medium log slice, and also talks about the small log slice. And then obviously the following pages, this shows obviously from the video how to actually use this on modeling chocolate, and obviously the small log slice there, and then of course how to use the log slices for rustic cakes, and then also on the cake here. So how to use, obviously on the video, show also how to use the Katie Sue Designs continuous bark mold. So actually show how to create this cake, and this is of course accented with some of my beautiful Flour Pro products like the toadstool and mushroom mold, the ferns, the also large antlers. Now, when you are using the molds, you can use these molds obviously for any type of paste. In the video I show using modeling chocolate, but also sugar paste and roll fondant can be used. But these molds, particularly this medium and the large one, medium and small one, are very useful to use for forming cookie dough, or biscuit dough as we call it in England, to actually form cookies or biscuits in the log shape. So I'm going to show you how to do this. So we're going to use 25 grams, approximately an ounce. An ounce is obviously 28.5 grams. So 1 ounce or 25 grams is going to be the perfect amount to fill the cavity of the mold and give you obviously even baking, but it's not going to overfill it or underfill the mold. Now, when you're making veneers, which I will talk about a little later in this video, that means you're making the topper for a cookie or a biscuit. You can use like 18, 20, 22 grams. But when you're using this to actually put your cookie dough in or your biscuit dough, you want to use 25 grams. Now, so we take 25 grams. We don't have to do anything to the mold. We're going to just take the cookie dough and put it into the mold. And I'm just going to press this in with my fingers. So this was chilled, and obviously it's just, as I said, come a little softer. It's come to room temperature. So just going to, and if you were making a lot of these, you can keep some of them in the fridge. And then, so just going to press that in level with the mold. And then what you're going to do is use an acrylic disc. All right, so just going to press your acrylic disc into here, and so that going to give you even, obviously, just make sure that comes to the top here. So just press that in with acrylic disc. This is a Flour Pro press, and this is now ready to be released onto the baking sheet. So when I bake cookies or biscuits, a couple of things. First of all, I'm using the sheet pan upside down, all right? And also I'm using 2 sheet pans, all right? So these are 2 sheet pans put together upside down. Of course, you can use different size sheet pans. This is a half sheet pan. This is a quarter sheet perforated liner. Now, this will help to make it easy, and especially when doing cookie pops, to get the stick in. But I also find it easier to put the release onto the mold or directly onto a flat surface rather than in a recess of the mold. Now here, I'm going to take the, so we have our 25 grams of the cookie dough here, gingerbread in this case. All you're going to do is just going to put this onto the sheet pan, upside down. Now I have a perforated baking mat. These are wonderful for baking on, and they will give a very even baking. And also you get this really nice design on the bottom, like almost a cross stitch. And you also will eliminate air bubbles that you get on parchment or directly onto a sill pad or other baking mats. So we're going to just literally hold my finger at the bottom here, and I'm just going to take the tab and I will release the cookie biscuit onto the perforated baking mat. And you can get these in different sizes. Obviously this size we will get 6 cookies, so you can make 6 log slices on here. Now, a couple of things you can do at this stage if you're going to, for example, make rustic cookies where you wanted to do an initial for a wedding or as an event. You could also, for example, spell out names like fall or autumn time. You could do an F, an A, an LLL, or autumn. You could do Thanksgiving. There's lots and lots of different ways of doing that. Birthday, and then of course then you could paint the letters in different colors, and like in autumn time you could do one in burgundy, one in orange, one in yellow, one in green. So when you do that, we're going to use, when we do the mat like that, you're just going to take either a cookie scribe needle or a, for example, veining tool, which is a Dresden veining tool, and you just scribe the initial of your choice into the cookie prior to baking it. And then once that's baked, of course, as you can see on the finished one here, this will open up like it's been carved into the wood. Also, you can create cookie pops. All right, so these are cookie pops, which these can obviously be used for guests at a wedding, an event, to take home with them. They can be wrapped in a cellophane bag. And then also, of course, you can use the cookie pop idea. For example, in my book 4, here you can see the Mr. and Mrs. for the topper of a wedding cake. These could actually be made in cookies, as well as, of course, modeling chocolate and other mediums. And when you make those, of course, you could do the same technique as I'm showing you, but just on a smaller little kebab skewer. Okay, and now when you make the cookie pops here, what I'm going to do is use a rosewood cookie stick. Now these are rosewood cookie sticks which are made for cookie bouquets. So I'm just going to cut the rosewood cookie stick in half. So that will give you two 6-inch pieces, about 12.5 about 15 centimeter pieces. And all I do is just use a pencil sharpener. So just sharpen that a little bit with a pencil sharpener. And then you take a little silicone mat, like a silicone baking mat. Now you see this one is a little bit thicker. When I do the cookie pops, I would use 30 grams of cookie dough. So it's just a little tiny bit thicker. And then what you do is just sort of take a silicone mat, and then it doesn't matter where you sit these position wise, as long as they obviously fit into go into the oven. But you're just going to take and just with you just twist this, and it goes into the cookie about halfway in. So this just stops you getting fingerprints on there, and just close that up. But so you need it a little tiny bit thicker there for this to accommodate the stick. Now once that's baked, this will be baked onto the cookie. Obviously that will be what it would look like when it's baked, all right, and finished off, and this will be ready to go into the oven. Now, these will go into the oven, and again, you'll need to just do a test. For example, I bake these for approximately 8.5 minutes, but it's going to depend on the cookie dough and obviously the temperature of your oven or your type of oven as well. So probably I suggest do a test to see how long it's going to take to do. And also, as I said, if it spreads too much, that means your dough is a little bit soft, then of course you can just add a little bit of extra flour to your dough. Now, when you bake, as I said, you'll bake this. So as you can see, this is a baked cookie. All right, so obviously this is a nice golden brown, and obviously you've got this nice texture on the bottom, a nice flat surface, and this is our cookie ready to get creative on. Okay, so that is, as I said, when you make, for example, gingerbread cookies, chocolate cookie, red velvet cookie, just sort of like a plain cookie, you're going to use that technique. Next, I'm going to explain about if I was one to do this technique, which is actually what you would use on sugar cookie, vanilla cookie, shortbread cookie, where you actually are going to paint into the mold and then press the cookie dough on the top. So this technique I'm showing you is actually used on my video for the medium log slice. And so I'm going to take some dusting powder. Now when I'm doing it for cookies, I found that the powdered dusting powders like we use for flowers is the best. Gel color is too thick for this particular application. So I will take some brown, this is a chocolate brown dust. And then I'm going to use, you can use like this is a dilution solution, which you can use for obviously luster dust and dusting powders. So you can use a little of that. You can use a couple of drops of vodka or a couple of drops of water. Okay, so really we're just rehydrating this. But as I said, you can use a couple of drops of water. As I said, you can use a little bit of the dilution solution, which I will show you a little later on. And then we're just going to mix this up. So we'll see. Doesn't want to be too watery. And then I'm going to paint onto the inside of the mold, all right? So, and this washes off very easily. You can also put this in a dishwasher as well, but what you're going to do is just use your brush. So as I said, this is shown on the video where I showed doing the log slice, but just a little bit different technique. So we're using a flat brush, and we're just going to brush over this part of the mold. So you see this is going to pull up the main detail on the mold. And then what you would do is you would take your 25 grams of cookie dough, sugar cookie dough, shortbread cookie dough, as I said, vanilla cookie dough, and you would press that into the mold, all right? So then when you peel that out, what it's gonna actually look like, this will be what it will look like before it goes in the oven. So this is actually a sugar cookie dough prior to going in the oven, 25 grams, all right? And so when you bake this, you're gonna get the lamination a little bit like a cinnamon roll. So the actual lamination will bake in that and you'll get the basic shape. Then all you have to do is just paint a little bit of airbrush color or powder color around the edge of the cookie, and it's finished for a basic cookie. All right, so as I said, those are the two differences. So remember, 25 grams if you're just using it as a regular flat cookie, but if you're doing the cookie pops, you will need to use 30 grams because you need to have enough space to get the stick in. So these would go in the oven and obviously be baked. Next step, we're going to move on to the decoration. So I'm going to show you several different techniques for obviously doing this really nice. So you can see here, this is one with the Katy Soup pumpkin. This is one obviously with my winter foliage mold on. And I'm going to show you how I do this really nice sort of rustic log slice effect. So here, what I do is I take some white airbrush color. Now, airbrush color, you can also use gel color as well, white gel color. This is a Simi Cakes one, so I'm going to just use a little of this. Very much like acrylic paint. And if you were doing this actually for craft, you know, if you were doing this in air drying clay, because you can make these as really nice coasters, obviously when you take the air drying clay out, you want to just sort of press on the top with your little flexi scraper to make sure it's flat. But if you do this in gingerbread colored hardy clay, you could do this and actually use those as coasters. It makes a really, really nice gift. But here you would do this effect with white acrylic paint. But you can see it's quite thick, almost like an acrylic paint. And I'm going to use some autumn gold dusting powder. This is going to give you a really nice, almost like a khaki color, like a pair of khaki pants. So I'm just going to mix this up. So you want this quite thick, all right? You can see it's almost like a sort of a khaki sort of color, okay? And what I'm going to do here is going to take the cookie, all right? So when you take your cookie, so then you take the cookie here and just going to brush this over the top, all right? So we're doing almost like you would do a painted effect, all right? So you just paint all over the cookie like that. Just showing you a small amount. And if it does get a little bit thick, you can obviously add a little bit of dilution solution, but you want it almost like if you think of doing shabby chic painting, it wants to be, as I said, quite thick. But you see, you're just going to paint this over the top. You just use a flat brush for this. You see how, so we're just going to pick up all of the beautiful detail in the small log slice. You see, so this gives this really lovely effect on the top. All right, and of course, if you use too much, it's going to fill in all the details. You want to do that quite sparsely. And then you would take your brown that we've just used, and you could also use a brown airbrush color as well. And then what we're going to do is just take your cookie and then you're going to paint around the edge of this. So you see how I'm just going to paint around the edge of the cookie. So this gives you the bark effect on the edge. And of course you can also do other color, other varieties of obviously like birch, river birch, silver birch, you know, so obviously you can do different woods, but you're just going to paint the brown around the outside. Now, if you were doing, for example, like the rustic cookies, all right, this type of cookie here, you could then, of course, where you've carved in the initial, you could paint that in orange or blue or metallics. You know, you can use pearl dust, you could use luster dust, you could use gel color, airbrush color. It really doesn't matter there. But for the actual painting part, as I said, I like to use what I've shown you. But you can, and of course, this could be done with the colors of the wedding, for example, navy blue, or as I said, you know, like seasonal colors like orange or obviously red. Could do these as name place markers. Will be really cute for Christmas time. You could put each guest initial, and then you could paint this in red, and you could embellish that with a little holly leaf or obviously some of my winter foliage elements. But that's obviously how you would do the basic cookie. Now in England we call this a tea biscuit, all right, so just a dry tea biscuit, a dry cookie. And so obviously when we have that, for example, for afternoon tea, this would be really nice as a gingerbread cookie. But when I'm especially doing this for a wedding or something, I like to add a little bit of extra So what I do is once the cookie is dry, all right, you're then going to then turn it over. So what you would actually do is you turn the cookie over, and then we would take flooding consistency, like run out consistency royal icing. This is flooding consistency, what we call it in the US. And what I've done is I've just put this into a bag and I just follow the basic outline of the cookie and I flood that in. So this is actually the underneath of the cookie. So this is a sort of like what I refer to as an upside down cookie. So it means when your guests eat the cookie, it's like eating it standing on your head. So the icing is on the underneath of the cookie rather than on top of the cookie. So this means you don't compromise in the design by adding the icing, but you have the icing as like a little extra bonus on the underneath, all right? And it's a really, really good way when you're doing these type of cookies to add that sort of icing without it really being noticeable. So as I said, that's sort of how I would do. And I've just colored this royal icing with the same autumn gold. Of course, this could be, if it's for a wedding, this could be a sort of the wedding color there. You know, if you've got a navy, if, for example, on a cookie like this, if this was navy blue, you could do navy blue royal icing on the bottom. This just shows you the difference. This cookie was baked on sort of parchment paper, and you can see how you get trapped air. Because the perforated baking mat, it doesn't have that. The air actually obviously gets to move around, so that's where you get this really lovely base on the cookie. All right, so very, very flat, which typically when you bake with that, will give a nice effect on the base. So this is your cookie, and as I said, you would obviously flood this, and then you could put this in your food dehydrator, 115 or 45 centigrade for 90 minutes, 2 hours to dry, and then of course you can start getting creative with some of your elements to decorate it. Now there are, as I said, other things you can create. This cookie here, this was done with royal icing. So what I actually did there is I used white royal icing, like again flooding consistency or color flow consistency, you know, what you use to flood a cookie, so like a soften, like almost a glaze. And again, you use the same brush, as I use a flat brush, obviously take some white icing and just brush over the top, or you could use a pastry brush. And you can see how you'll have the icing is going to be translucent, almost like the icing on the top of, say, a cinnamon roll. And then, of course, all you do is then you just go around the edge. So you're going to paint the brown around there, and you can use your brush and you're just going to cut into the detail of the log slice. Now also these cookies could be used on the end of a bûche de Noël, the Yule log. All right, so when you make a Yule log, you could actually take these cookies and you could obviously use either type as the end of your Yule log, all right, if you're Swiss roll, and that would be a nice addition, an alternative to obviously use in marzipan or other mediums as well. So those are how you would do the two rustic techniques of painting the cookie. Now the cookie, the mold, the log slice mold, can also be used for other mediums. Like for example, this is modeling chocolate, this is rolled fondant or sugar paste, this is marzipan. All right, so you can take, as I said, 25 grams of either of those and put into the mold, or a little less. All right, so actually in the directions of the for the book 4 for the small log slice, if you're making veneers for your cookie, you could go down to like 18, 20, 22 grams. Okay, this is actually 25 grams, so it shows you. That would be like if you make your cookie dough that thickness, but when you are doing a veneer, you can use a little less, like around 18 grams to 20 grams. And so again, when you make cookies, so these are what I refer to as veneer cookies, which means that you're actually making the topper of the cookie. All right, these are two actually featured in book 4. So the veneer is the topper, which could be made in advance. So this means that rather than obviously making the cookie in the shape of the log slice, you'll put in an embellishment on top, a veneer, obviously made in the mold on top of your cookie. Now, when you do that, what you would do is, again, you take your cookie dough and you just press your cookie, like we did the cookie dough, but you press your modeling chocolate. So this is modeling chocolate. You press your sugar paste rolled fondant, or you press your marzipan into the mold, and you press with the acrylic disc on the top. So again, you press with the acrylic disc, and then you're just going to peel that out. Now also you can use the technique which I've used here, which is just exactly the same as I explained for the sugar type of cookie. You can paint the brown in here. So here you can see this is modeling chocolate pressed in the mold. So when you take that out of the mold, it's going to give you your log slice. So it saves a lot of time with painting. Then of course you could you just would paint the edge of that. So you can just paint the brown around the edge. So you can just paint around the edge of this. Again, of course, you can use different color browns, and you can also airbrush, but you paint around the edge of the cookie like this. And what this does is going to give you veneer. All right, so this is a veneer of modeling chocolate. Now, modeling chocolate, obviously, and marzipan, both are very nice to eat. All right, and obviously a little bit more expensive than sugar paste or rolled fondant, but obviously tastes much better. And but it's a nice way to add that sort of extra sort of luxury to your cookies by using modeling chocolate or marzipan. And then, of course, once you have done this veneer, you can then get creative with obviously making the decorations for the cookie. And there are lots of things here we can use. So for the obviously decoration of the rustic cookies, my winter foliage mold is obviously perfect for this. Now remember, there are 3 separate YouTube videos which show how to use this in more as wired components. So you just follow directions in book 4 with a paste size, and except obviously generally on cookies you're going to do everything half relief. So you're going to do half relief. Obviously these are the little large cones. Obviously you're going to do obviously the conifer. But when you do like the spruce or the pieces for cookies, obviously this is the U, you can just do these half relief rather than obviously putting a wire in them. You're just going to take them out. Some really nice elements on this. Now this is the conifer berry, which is shown in the book. And if you do that in red paste, you can pop that out and then just use a food marker pen and put a little dot on there that makes holly berries as well. When you're doing things on cookies, like if you want to make things shiny, you can take a little tiny bit of vegetable fat shortening and you can brush over once they're dry. You can just brush over the top of that with the vegetable fat, the shortening. When I make wired ones, I normally use confectioner's glaze, but obviously vegetable fat or shortening or coconut oil doesn't really have any taste, and that will make things shiny. And also on the video, I show how to use the yew berry. So this is actually the yew berry. And if you press cream paste into there, and then you put a little bit of green paste onto the end, and you use, for example, a little piping nozzle, tip number 2, and go over the surface of that, that will actually make a really adorable little acorn. All right, so when you're decorating obviously for more autumn time, you can make little tiny acorns. These can obviously be cut in half as well. And of course my Flower Pro my nuts and berries one, and then of course there's that has the sort of half acorns on, so there's lots of different elements you can use there. And so when we're using the pieces, so you can see here, this just shows you some examples obviously of different evergreens that I've got there. The conifer is really stunning to use on these cookies, but this one is done actually with the spruce, and I use some pearl paint. Remember, this is all shown on the videos in the book, but I've used my regular pinecone mold. This is my sectioned pine cone, so it has 3 different cavities, and these smaller pine cones are on the winter foliage. This is like the little large cone. And so those would be used on the top. Now also on video number 2, on the video for the medium log slice, another way you can do the log slice is, for example, this would be, as again, modeling chocolate. This is dry dust, so I used actually some chocolate brown and some gray dusting powders, and just using your powders dry, you can cut in with an angled brush. So you could use a brush like this, and then with some gray you can cut in. So you just really follow the directions on the video for the medium log slice. And so that one is actually done with dust, so dry dust. All right, there's lots of different elements that you have here. And when you put these, so the idea is if you're making a veneer, all right, so if you're making a veneer like this, obviously this would be, can be made in advance. And then of course the idea behind it, a veneer, is then when you have, you've closer to the celebration, for the wedding, for example, if you had to make like 200 cookies, what you could then do is take your cookie out of the oven, and if you're using modeling chocolate, when it becomes into close to a warm area, it's going to soften a little bit. So you could literally let them cool for about 2 minutes and then put that on the top, and the modeling chocolate will actually fuse. It will warm and melt to the fuse onto the cookie. But also you could of course put this on a larger cookie, and you could then use some melted chocolate, or you could put some royal icing onto here, and you could put this on the top, and then of course that your cookie is finished. All right, so this is good when time restraint, when you obviously don't have a lot of time to sort of do everything at one time. But also, of course, these cookies, these ones, you could make these in advance and you could freeze them at this stage and then take them out and then just paint them like the day before they're needed. So these freeze really, really well. And so, as I said, there's lots and lots of options there. But when you are assembling the pieces on the top, like the conifers and things like that, usually you're going to use a little bit of, you can use some royal icing. Also, you can use some piping gel. So I just have some piping gel here and a little applicator. So you just put like a little, and so you can put a little bit of obviously the conifer there, and you can put whatever you want to onto there. And when I was talking about, for example, like doing the rustic cookies, when you're doing the rustic cookies there, you could of course just use like a little tiny bit of conifer and, for example, like little berries. So you can just sort of make these really nice when you're doing, as I said, different types of cookies. But as I said, piping gel works really well for this. So a little piping gel, you can just put that on to wherever you want that to go. And of course you could add a little pine cone. And these can be made in advance and obviously just dried. So you have a little, and then of course you could add like a little berries here. And you know, these could be used on the top. So you can do all sorts of combinations with those and make them all unique pieces of art, okay? And that would be how you would do, obviously how we would do to put the pieces onto the cookie. And so remember, directions are in the YouTube video for how I did the, we use the winter foliage mold. Now this one here, which is nice for autumn time, this is done in the Katy Sue. This is that like actually like the Halloween jack-o'-lantern. All right, so it's got little eyes on, but this is also beautiful for autumn time. Here in the United States, obviously we use pumpkins for autumn, for Thanksgiving, obviously, which is the third Thursday in November. So very, very popular. Now, of course, you can use, when you're using molds, again, giving you ideas, when you're using molds, of course, you could do pieces solid. This is modeling chocolate, but you could use fondant like that. But also, it's quite a lot of fondant or modeling chocolate to eat. So something you can do is you just roll out the modeling chocolate. Think of lining a tart shell or a pie shell. And so what you would then do is you just would take a little bit of vegetable fat shortening, just a little tiny bit into the mold. You like lay the paste in like you would pie dough into a tart pan. And then I use my little flexi scraper. So I just trim off the excess. And what I do is I use my cosmetic sponge just to press that into the mold. And then you can take, like, for example, here in the US, this is a Tootsie Roll, which is a chocolate candy, which you can buy in the UK as well. But you just take Tootsie Rolls, you just put these in the package, in the microwave for 10 seconds. That's going to warm. It's almost a bit like modeling chocolate. And then what you do is you're just going to press that into the mold. And you see that's going to then actually, sort of, that's one Tootsie Roll. It's filled the pumpkin. And then you take that out. And then, of course, you could then dust it. This one painted, or you could dust this in orange. You could airbrush this. But also when your consumer eats, obviously, the cookie, it means you get a little treat inside the pumpkin. It's not just solid modeling chocolate or solid fondant. You can actually use this same technique on my Pinecone molds as well. The pine cone can be used. And Tootsie Rolls can be used to make the little pine cones. You can actually press pieces of Tootsie Roll in here. My larger pine cones, my small antlers, all work very well with Tootsie Roll because it's very much like a modeling chocolate consistency. And so that's sort of a really nice idea. You can also use this technique for Halloween where you actually put about a half a teaspoon of sprinkles into this, and then obviously you'd have your cookie veneer ready. So once your cookie is ready, you then would take this and you put a little bit of royal icing around the edge, and you then would turn that over, and so then it will be like a pumpkin piñata. So then obviously when somebody bites into it, they've got sprinkles inside the pumpkin. So just sort of fun ideas for obviously season of autumn, Thanksgiving, obviously Halloween, and you can use this for, as I said, lots of different occasions. So obviously the Flour Pro Small Log Slice, very versatile product, not only to use to press cookie dough in, to bake, turn out and bake, but also to use for, obviously, for actually making veneers to go on to the top of cookies or biscuits, and also making the ends of the bûche de Noël, the Yule log. I hope you've enjoyed this video of using my Flour Pro Mini Log Slice by Katy Sue Designs. And we'll have fun using this to shape your cookie biscuit dough in prior to baking. and also to use for veneers on top of your biscuits and cookies. Remember, check out my other YouTubes on using my medium and large log slice, and also things like my pinecone video. And of course, also I have a YouTube on making larger bûche de Noël and mini bûche de Noël, the little classic U-logs, which are really fun, made in obviously using the mini log slice as well and the medium log slice. So until next time, this has been Chef Nicholas Lodge. Sweet wishes. Bye.